Hey, it's James from Marketing for Restaurants, and welcome to episode 76 of Secret Sauce, the restaurant marketing podcast. Lessons for restaurants from Tripadvisor and The Shed, the best fake restaurant in London.
Some restaurants are quiet, lose money, and the owner works 70 hours a week. Other restaurants are busy, profitable, and the owners work a few hours a day. What's the difference? They have a secret sauce. Join James from Marketing for Restaurants as he helps you come up with your recipe for restaurant success. Your secret sauce.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It's been a little while. This is the first one that I'm recording since New Year's. So we've been away, had a glorious holiday through Asia, and we're going to cover that in a podcast because there was a lot of interesting little things that happened on the way because we were that tourist who's looking for a place to eat. And I want to share with you some of the struggles that we had, some of the epic experiences that we had, and pull out a lot of the lessons that we can do with that. Now, this is a story from late last year. This is the story of The Shed at Dulwich, which was for a short time the best rated restaurant in London, which is an absolutely amazing feat. And when you think about all of the work that you have to do to get the accolade from a big respected company like Tripadvisor to be the best restaurant in London, and I've got to say there's a lot of restaurants in London, there's a lot of really good restaurants in London. I've never been there, but it's got a pretty good reputation. To be able to beat out all of that competition, then you think about all of the training that you need to do, all of the preparation, how you've got to come up with something really unique and create a really exciting experience for your customers. That is no mean feat, or is it? And this is I find this absolutely amazing. Now, we've always known that there were issues with TripAdvisor and TripAdvisor's algorithms and that there was some dodginess out there. This whole story starts with a guy called Oohbah Butler. Now, Oohbah had a job, so he writes for Vice. He's a freelance journalist. But one of the things that he used to do was write fake reviews on TripAdvisor. I think that this is really interesting because it's the first real story that we get where someone has actually talked about openly about the fake reviews that they get. And it's interesting. So he was getting paid £10 a review to write, a little bit of a story about how he went to a restaurant and had an amazing time there and really enjoyed it and that you should go there too. Now, in the past, and so we've seen it where restaurants would hire companies, typically in India, where they would write 100, 200 reviews for a restaurant. And not only would they write 100 reviews for your restaurant, they would write a couple of hundred restaurant reviews about restaurants around you so that your score might be 4, 4.5, the ones around you are 3.5. So when someone's looking on TripAdvisor to get an idea of where to go, obviously your restaurant comes up really highly. It's interesting. And so those reviews you can often pick as being fake and you read them and you think, I'm not really sure if that guy's ever been there before. This guy, Oohbah, he worked as a journalist, so he's really good at writing anyway. So his reviews, they're a lot harder to pick. However, he's probably not writing a lot of them per restaurant. Now, he did have some concerns about this whole practice and the fact that they were so easy to get on TripAdvisor. And so what he was wondering was what would happen if he created a fake restaurant and he put it up on TripAdvisor, got a few of his friends to review it. So he created the concept for The Shed at Dulwich and he created a website for it. Nothing overly fancy. There's a couple of photos which they look okay. They're not, I wouldn't have thought they're great photos. The interesting thing is there's one with an egg on it and in the background it looks like there's some sort of bacon. It's actually his foot. So it's a close-up and it's actually his foot, which is slightly disturbing and one would have thought. Once the website was up, he then got a few of his friends to start writing reviews. He was putting reviews up there. And things started to take off from there. And this is actually a really interesting story because he's documented quite well the process that he went through. And so in April 2017, set up a fake website. It's appointment only. And I think that this is the thing that's really interesting. And he says that it's been operating privately for years. All right, so we're starting to build that story, and a story that people are going to be interested in. So it's been operating for years privately. And the first thing is, wow, this is a successful restaurant that I haven't heard of. This is interesting. He does a nice job of describing the menu as well. They're all sort of linked to moods, which it's a little bit out there, but it obviously worked with the target market that he was aiming for. Starts getting the fake reviews in May. And he says, that he watched as the ranking rose from 18,149 to inside the top 1,500 in a matter of months. And he thinks that a part of the success was the fact that you needed to do an appointment. And what he did was he bought a burner phone. So he had a phone specifically for the restaurant. And he answered it very rarely because he didn't actually want to. It's not a real restaurant. He didn't actually want to get people in there. And the interesting thing is that the phone starts to ring and people are starting to want to make an appointment. And of course, because he doesn't answer the phone, then it becomes increasingly difficult to get an appointment to make a booking at the shed at Dulwich, which means that it's increasing, people want what they can't have. And I think, the fact that the phone calls are being ignored, then obviously they're that busy that they don't need to make bookings, and it's probably people who are already there, they're making the repeat bookings. This is what people are thinking, and so nothing begets a queue like a queue. And people are becoming increasingly interested in wanting to go to the restaurant. And people are starting to buy into the hype. Now, he's not doing any marketing for this restaurant at all. So this is a really interesting thing. Now, obviously, we're a restaurant marketing company. We don't want everyone to just say, well, I'm not going to take any bookings. He's lucky. This isn't his job. So he didn't actually need anyone to come into the restaurant, and he didn't actually need anyone to write any real reviews. So it doesn't really work if you've got that one little impediment that you actually have to make revenue on your restaurant. He didn't have a lease to pay. He lived with a mate, and it was the mate's shed. It wasn't his shed, and he wasn't paying a lease on it. So obviously his restaurant was a lot cheaper to run than anyone else's. Now, when the phone would ring, he would say, look, we're sorry, but we're booked up for the next 6 weeks, and just hang up, which makes it really, people are just thinking this place has got to be epic if they can treat people like that. Now, by the end of August, they're at number 156. Which is really, and the number of phone calls is increasing as more and more people, and you've got to remember that probably Tripadvisor was the sole source of traffic. People would have been going from Tripadvisor to the website to sort of check it out because there's not really any SEO there, and he's not doing any marketing around it. So with a crappy website that he's got, it's going to be all of the traffic's coming from Tripadvisor, and they're either going to be trying to book directly, or they're going to the website to have a look at the menu and say, wow, this is exactly where I want to eat. And the amazing thing is, as this restaurant becomes increasingly difficult to get into, they start getting promotional gifts sent to them, free samples that people want them to use. People wanting to work are applying for jobs there. He gets an email from a council which wants to relocate them. And this is a little bit embarrassing. An Australian production company gets in touch saying they want to feature them in a video for an aircraft, which, that's really crazy. These people haven't done any research whatsoever. He has a Skype meeting with a PR agency that promises that they'll get them onto the Mail Online. Now, he goes on to say, it's winter and they're at number 30. So he's still working this. He's still trying to get it up higher and higher and higher. And the experiment is really starting to get interesting at this time because he's stopped on the street as he's sort of leaving his house by people saying, do you know where the shed is? Because we're looking at it. And then the location kind of gets out and people are saying, wow, we didn't realize you were so close. Is there any chance that we can get in? He's now taking booking requests from people all over the world. And finally, on the 1st of November, he gets this email from Tripadvisor and it's entitled Information Request. And he's wondering, oh, wow, what's happened? Is the gig up? Have they finally found out? And it's not that at all. It's the fact that they are now the number one rated of 18,092 restaurants in London. The shed at Dulwich is the top, which is absolutely amazing for a restaurant that hasn't had any people whatsoever ever in it. And he goes on to say, a restaurant that doesn't exist is currently the highest rank in one of the world's biggest cities on perhaps the internet's most trusted review site. And he says, on TripAdvisor's site, The company says it dedicates significant time and resources to ensuring that the content on TripAdvisor reflects the real experiences of real travellers. So at this point, the phone is ringing off the hook. He's coming up with more and more lies. It's so funny. He talks about answering the phone. There's a frustrated woman who says, "Oh my goodness, I finally got through. I first contacted you back in August. I've heard nothing back." And this is where Oohbah gets the idea actually opening the shed, actually having some people in and cooking them some food. Now, given the fact that he's been a complete fraud right up until now, he decides to continue on in a very similar vein. So what he's going to do is he is going to open the shed. He's going to get some people in, but he's worried about what their reaction is. So there's a couple of things that he's going to do because, he decides that the food he's going to cook is going to be microwave food. So nothing special there at all. But what he decides to do is to get some actors in to pretend that the food is absolutely amazing and that they're completely enjoying the experience that they're having at the shed. So the big night arrives, they've been down to the supermarket, they've bought their frozen dinners, they come up with a bit of a plan. He starts briefing all of his team, including the fake guests. And it's quite funny, there's a picture, he puts a table up actually on the shed. He's got chickens running around. So rather than having lobsters in a tank that you can choose the one that you want to eat, he has chickens flying around. And that creates a little bit of confusion because, of course, one of the couples said that they came because it was rated as the best vegetarian restaurant in London. And they're like, why do you have chickens here? So there's a little bit of confusion there. Obviously, the TripAdvisor system isn't as good as it could be in more ways than one. There's a group having a birthday and he's got a DJ playing restaurant noises with lots of dings in them because what he doesn't want is for anyone to hear the ding of the microwave when the food is finally prepared. The guests talk loudly about how amazing the food is. Their first couple leaves, it was a guy and a girl. The guy leaves looking completely furious and I think he sort of woke up to the fact that this was a complete and giant sham. But one of the parties says, "So now that we've booked once, is it easier to make a rebooking because we would like to come back?" Now, I think this is really quite amazing and I think it goes to the heart of what it was that Oohbah created, which is an incredibly elaborate TripAdvisor fueled Emperor's Got No Clothes restaurant. And I think there's so many of these restaurants out there where the experience isn't that good. The food is incredibly expensive, but because everyone enjoys going to this restaurant or that restaurant, it's because it's got such a reputation. The actual product is not the food, it's going to the restaurant. It's being able to tell other people that you went to the restaurant. I went there and this is what it was like. So they actually fell for it. Hook, line and sinker. The fact that they were in, and that was the exciting thing, being able to get into the most exclusive restaurant in London was amazing for them and they wanted to repeat that experience, which you have to think about the psychological makeup of creating a product that, because he really didn't have a product. One of them, it was described as truffle mac and cheese. It was mac and cheese from a supermarket. It doesn't get any more basic than that, really, does it? So a really interesting story about the whole TripAdvisor algorithm. Now, the whole idea for Oohbah Butler to try this experiment was, he says, one day sitting in the shed that he lives in, which became the shed, I had a revelation. Within the current climate of misinformation and society's willingness to believe absolute bullshit, maybe a fake restaurant is possible. Maybe it's exactly the kind of place that could be a hit. That was the foundation for what it was that he did. And I think when you start looking at it, so nothing gets a queue like a queue. So what are you doing around demand management? Because if you can say that the place is booked out, then obviously it's good. Obviously it's a place that you should go to. And people always want what it is that they can't have. So I think demand management is a really important thing and particularly, when you say, well, we're fully booked on a Friday night, would you like to come in on a Thursday or a Wednesday? This is the kernel of that demand management thing. It's that little tiny seed where the first thing that you need to do is to be completely booked on a Friday or a Saturday night. And now the trick is to start to move some of that demand, because some of it's flexible and some of it is inflexible. Some people are going out on a Friday night. Some people are going out just because they're going out. So if you're working, you're much less likely to go out during midweek because you've got to be up early to work the next day. However, if you're retired, much less so inhibited by the need to be dining out on the weekend. So it's much easier to move those sort of people to a midweek dining. And they might make that initial booking for the weekend, but then it's booked out. They're quite happy, and it gives you that social validation. Well, they must be really busy if they are booked out. It's got to be a good restaurant. And this is what fed into the whole shed story was, and particularly I think the way that he handled it, because he was saying, no, we're booked out for 6 weeks and just hung up. If you can be like that, then it must be an absolutely amazing experience. It must be truly incredible, because he seems quite rude. Can you imagine how good the experience is going to be if people are prepared to put up with that? It's the soup Nazi out of Seinfeld, isn't it? So have a think about the way that you're managing demand in your restaurant. And it goes back to the other things like happy hour. We were talking to a restaurant about this yesterday. Some restaurants will open at 6 or 7 at night. What about if you open at 4 and you have a menu that is very easy for the kitchen to prepare? And then the kitchen's already in there, they're doing prep, someone's already in cleaning up front of house. You've got the staff there for light sort of work. Create a special happy hour menu, because this is the thing. Happy hour doesn't need to be about drinks. It could be about the food. This platter, a cheese platter, these things, so people can grab a bite in the afternoon before they're going to head out for a later dinner, or whatever it is that however you want to position it in the menu that you're going to create. Because the interesting thing is that when people start coming in for that main meal, if your happy hour runs till 6 o'clock, obviously people are going to come in at 5:45. They're going to order the happy hour menu, and they're going to be in until 6:30 consuming that meal. Now, the first proper guest is going to come in after 6 o'clock, but they're going to see that there's already people in there. It's the hardest person to get, particularly midweek, is that first customer in there. So this is the opportunity to start filling the restaurant. If it's half full, then you're walking down the street and you see a restaurant that's empty and one that's half full. People naturally they're going to be wondering, well, what is it that the locals know? This is obviously the place that I want to go to. Now, the second thing that I think is really interesting is the Emperor's New Clothes. So the feedback that he got from the people who were actually dining in the restaurant was really good. And that was because, and I think people were struggling to work out what their experience was. And so they were falling back on the social validation. What is it that other people are saying? And if you can hear someone going, oh my God, this food is amazing. I haven't tasted anything like this before. It's absolutely incredible. Then you're a little bit confused. You're thinking that it's some sort of new age cuisine that you're not quite up on. That then becomes part of the product, that you're experiencing some new age cuisine, and you're going to take your cues from the people around you. Well, it must be really good. You don't want to appear like the person who doesn't understand evolving culinary tastes. So you're going to defer to what it is that the people around you are saying. Well, the food's really, really good. Because imagine, and the worst case scenario would be you went on Tripadvisor and said, oh my God, this place is completely awful. It's outdoors, the food tasted like it had been microwaved, the service was really sloppy, I can't see what everyone thinks about it, this place is awful, 1 star. Now, if the Tripadvisor system worked, that would have happened, but it didn't happen, which is completely amazing. And that's the last point, I think, is that the Tripadvisor reviews system is fundamentally broken. It's too easy to game. It's too easy for restaurants to get good reviews written about their restaurant by people who've never been there. And we know that because his restaurant only opened for like a couple of nights. And it became London's #1 restaurant with having no one actually eaten there. And I think that's a big part of the story that illustrates just how fundamentally broken that algorithm is. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what the long-term prognosis is for Tripadvisor. They seem to be a little bit lost. They were a reviews and rating type thing. How do you monetize that? Back in the day, back in like 2014, their share price was $110, which, that's not too shabby. it's fallen to about $35 as I'm having a look at it now. So the company is worth a third of what it was, and it's done a whole lot of work since over the last 4 years or 3.5 years. I think the move into bookings, obviously that's a natural sort of progression. You know, here's a good place to eat. Maybe you want to book there. We can clip the ticket in on the way through. But you've got to remember, of course, that the booking system needs to be used by a restaurant. And Tripadvisor was always a troubled relationship with restaurants because of the fact that there were so many dodgy reviews there. And I think restaurants have become increasingly hesitant to use Tripadvisor's booking subsidiaries. So in Australia, there's Dimmy, you've got Seat Guru, a few others like that. And it was interesting talking to Australian restaurants when Dimmy was bought by Tripadvisor. There was a lot of them who said, you know, this is the last thing we want because the reviews are so dodgy on Tripadvisor. And the dodgy reviews, of course, that impacts it from a consumer point of view. You've got to remember that they've got to have the customers, which is the restaurant, because they're the ones who pay the money for the bookings. But you've also got to have a rating system that works for consumers. And I don't use Tripadvisor for restaurants at all because I know, I see how badly that it can be off. Now, and actually that's a lie, because what I'll actually do is if I'm going to eat at a restaurant that, you know, might be a customer's restaurant or it might be someone that we're talking to or someone who's reached out for help, well, that's one of the things I like to have a look at. And I've eaten at some restaurants and the Tripadvisor has been, you know, very low. And you think, wow, it'll be interesting to see what this experience is like. And you think, wow, completely off base. This is an excellent restaurant and I'd be happy to recommend it. And I've eaten in other places where everyone raves about it on Tripadvisor and then you go in there and you think, oh, it's going to be really hard to market this restaurant because there's front of house problems, there's back of house problems, the menu's awful, the place is awful. And yet on Tripadvisor, everyone's raving about it. And you just think this cannot be the case. I remember once I read one of a restaurant and it said, this is the best Italian restaurant that I've ever been to. And I thought, for that statement to be correct, it must be the only Italian restaurant that this person has ever gone to because the food there is not very Italian and slightly less than what I could prepare myself. And I'm no chef, I'm no cook, I'm ordinary at best. Their food was pretty awful for a restaurant. So it will be interesting to see what the long-term future holds for Tripadvisor because I think that they could have some problems. Now, interestingly enough, of course, Oohbah Butler's story about how he created London's #1 restaurant, that in itself went viral. So he did multiple television interviews over it, millions and millions of dollars worth of press coverage for him, which was sad because he didn't actually have a restaurant. It is an interesting story. I love watching those things where someone has something that does go viral because it's always interesting to pull out the little bits and pieces about what made it go viral. And this was just one of those stories that I think tapped into everyone's concerns now about how it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust some of the stuff that's online. Which brings me, so reviews, when you're looking for a place, I think one of the things that's really interesting is we did some research on a list of restaurants in Melbourne. There was a top 20 list. And across the board, there were lower ratings for Tripadvisor than there was for Facebook and Google. Now, this was in a top 20 list. And yes, I know that there's issues with people who create these lists and, you know, it's always a bit political. But the restaurants have got to be, you know, probably pretty good. Like I would have thought definitely above average. And the thing about this list was that the Tripadvisors, and they were all out of 5, the Tripadvisor ones were usually 1 star below Facebook and Google. And I know that when I'm researching places, I will use a Facebook rating much higher than I will use a Tripadvisor, and same with Google. Google is quite reliable, and that's because it's actually tied to a real person. So with Trip, you can just be anyone. And the other thing that I think is important is that everyone who does reviews, they're really desperate to get a whole heap of reviews. And Tripadvisor, you know, I've received emails from them before. Oh, look, you were in Buenos Aires. Here's 10 restaurants. Can you please rate them? And you click through and it's got the restaurants. You know, what do you think of this place? Now, it's got no idea if I've been to those restaurants or not, but you can quite easily, and it's only a few clicks to give them a 1 or a 5 star rating. So they're interested, and they say, that they've got 15 quadrillion reviews from all around the world. That's fantastic, but I think most of them are bogus. Well, a massive proportion of them. TripAdvisor's thinking that's a legit one because they've gone and asked me for those reviews, which I just think is madness. Whereas Google on your phone, it knows where you've been because it's following your location. You've just been to this restaurant. What did you think of it? And it's actually tied to my account. So whenever anything is tied to someone's personal account, I think they're more likely to be honest about what it is that they're saying online. And so Facebook and Google give you that little bit of added support. So I think if you're looking at managing reviews, and so some restaurants don't manage reviews at all. It's just like it is what it is. If you're looking to manage them, I would definitely spend more time looking at your Facebook and Google reviews than I would worrying about Trip. It's a little bit different in tourist places. I know that a lot of people really push the tourist thing, but I think that there's other ways around. Rather than managing your TripAdvisor reviews, I think if you're much better off getting into a tourist guidebook and becoming the must-do activity in a location. So, who is it that's writing the reviews? And so one of the interesting ones is, airlines. Airlines want to drive you to go and to fly somewhere. So what is it that they're doing? Can you get someone to write an article about, the must-eat restaurant in Auckland is this? The other thing that I find really interesting about those sort of guidebooks is that they'll often look for the quintessential experience. So when we were in Singapore, we wanted to eat what Singaporean people were eating. So we tried to go and get the most non-touristy things that we could do because that was what we wanted to do. We wanted to experience real Singaporean food. So it does give you a significant opportunity to get a lot more exposure. And the interesting thing is you find that once you get on those lists, then your TripAdvisor reviews tend to go up because I think that's just that natural progression. So that's generally the way that we recommend it. If you like to live dangerously, you can do what the White Moose Cafe did. So I think we've talked about the White Moose before. Very savvy social media operators, very clever in the way that they run their social media. And they generated a little bit of a firestorm recently. They had a YouTube blogger say, we're coming to Dublin and we would like to stay. So there's accommodation associated with the White Moose Cafe. We'd love to stay there. It looks really great. And of course, we'll tell everyone about it. So we'd like some free accommodation. Now, he didn't publish who it was, but he said, and he put on Facebook, we're banning all bloggers. Now, I don't really think that the blogger understood exactly what it was that she was getting herself in for. So the blogger's name was Elle Darby, and they didn't publish her name, but they said, we've got this email from someone and now we're just banning all bloggers because we don't want you to come into our hotel. Now, she decided that she would get on to social media and discuss how upset she was that they would out her. I think a few people worked out who it was that she was. And, some people were saying that she should go out and get a real job. And they said a few nasty things. And I don't think, there shouldn't be anything like that. So no one's defending that. But she then jumped on social media and said, all she's trying to do is to tell people about great places. And I think this is where you get that very difficult relationship that bloggers have in that they do their job in return for free stuff. So it's very hard to build up an authentic following when, obviously she's saying how great the hotel was, but that's actually her job because she got a free hotel stay there. And quite rightly, the White Moose Cafe said, how am I going to pay for the people, pay for your food, pay for the staff who look after you, pay for all of the things I need to do in running a small business? Her video went viral. White Moose Cafe then did a spoof press conference where they kind of apologised. They then issued her an invoice for all of the PR that they'd created for her because her video had been seen hundreds of thousands of times, really got a lot of really good traction for her. And a lot of people were saying, good on the White Moose Cafe because I think people are a little bit over bloggers. And I know restaurants are definitely over bloggers. They're sick and tired of getting these requests from them. I think that the big mistake that Elle did was she should have had a little bit of a closer look at the place that she was approaching, realising that they were fairly aggressive in their social media, and realising that their social media following was significantly bigger than hers, and that it wasn't just your normal accommodation place that would be, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea and it's probably not going to cost us a lot of money, so we might do that. This was a very professional social media organisation, so it was interesting to watch the way that that went. Now, the White Moose Cafe, they get a lot of people who say that they would never go there, that they would never eat there, and they're very, very, very comfortable with that. There is a target market out there. They play directly to that target market. They're not interested in anyone else. And in fact, they actively discourage the people who don't want to be a part of their story, who aren't their followers, who aren't the people that they're aiming for. They're very happy for those people to just go away and never visit them. So that's the other way that you can do it. I think you need to be very careful when you take that tack, because if it goes wrong, it can go wrong very, very badly. Viral social media is a two-edged sword, and I think El Darby found that out. You always want something to go viral. Hers went viral, I think, in a bad way, because her message was not well received. And when it was placed against that of the White Moose Cafe, it did make her story look, well, it wasn't a great look. Let's just put it that way. So I'll include some links to the show notes, not only to the shed in Dulwich, but also to the White Moose Cafe and the work that they've done, and to Elle's videos that she's put up as well. Because I think it's an interesting way. This is a good way for you to get a feel for the way that people are producing the kind of content that they're putting out there. I wanted to talk briefly about Yelp. In short, I would do nothing with Yelp. I think Yelp is a very dangerous product, very expensive to use, with often very limited returns. They have some very dodgy business practices, I think, and we're going to do I'm hoping to do an entire podcast on just the way that they do that and the way that some restaurants have been fighting back against Yelp. So that's about it. You have an outstanding day. I hope it's a busy day for you and you've got lots of customers and lots of repeat customers. So that's about it. Bye.
Want more customers for your restaurant, cafe or takeout? Every month, our marketing tools and information are used by thousands of restaurant owners just like you to help them find more customers and turn them into repeat customers. All of our tools and information is designed specifically for restaurant owners. We know you don't have a lot of time to spend marketing or learning complicated procedures, so our tools are quick and easy to use. If you're looking to increase your revenue and profits or want to work less hours, check out marketingforrestaurants.com.